So one other question. This one.
Did I pass the first question?
Oh, you did.
Okay.
You passed the first question. So another one that people would ask me, and I get it, especially in even our times now, but it seems every time, I became Catholic when the Vietnam War was just winding down, and there was civil rights protests and so forth. So it was a time of a lot of difficulty, and today we look around and people say, boy, these last couple of years with COVID and all the division and everything are tough. How do you talk about Jesus bringing joy when that's the circumstance?
I think that's a wonderful question is, how can we be a joyful people when you turn on the news and you hear about what's going on in Ukraine? You hear about all the violence in this country, and I think that's a very real question, and that needs to be upheld. Like, that's a very difficult question. Yeah. And to that I say, and I think we as a church say, God, this God who creates the universe, and like in Genesis 1, what's he see it as? He sees it as good, and then he sees the chaos that unfolds throughout the rest of history. And then he looks down on the earth and he says, I still want to enter in the form of a baby, in a feeding trough. Emmanuel, God with us, this God who created everything and created everything good. All that we are, all that I am, all that you are, all that we are, God created, but yet he was still fully dependent on true human beings. That God doesn't say, oh, I'll just save you from afar, but he enters into the most helpless of human conditions as a baby in a feeding trough and completely rejected. And then what happens a couple days later, on December, I think it's 28th, we celebrate the Holy Innocents, where Jesus, Mary, and Joseph have to flee. They have to they're migrants because they're fleeing violence. That they entered into the fullness of the human condition, of violence, of suffering, of war, and that God didn't give up on us. That he said, no, you're still worth living for, and ultimately you're worth dying for. That's what we look for at Christmas. And that's something that is somehow in some way joyful for us, that God became human. That God knows what it's like to flee a war-torn country. That God knows what it's like to be part of this world that's full of violence and pain and suffering and famine and any injustice whatsoever. That God entered fully into that and redeemed that, and didn't just sit back and say, well, good luck. That he entered in the form of a baby born of a poor woman from Nazareth. And I think that's something that's beautiful for us to reflect on. And that's what Christmas calls us to reflect on is, my goodness, God became human, became one of us, embraced us, and continues to embrace us. And what does he come for? That your joy might be complete somehow. And I think that's just something we can always reflect on as a Christian people. Is that God became one of us so our joy might be complete. And it's just, I sit back, I'm like, for me, Lord, like little me. And it's this beautiful love story that God has with us. And it's for you and for me and for you as well.
Yeah. No, hey, that's good. And a couple things makes me think of, there's a movie, some of you know, more my age, 20 years ago that came out, still popular. It's one of these kind of rom-coms or lighthearted but a joyful, called Love Actually. And I know it's funny, I've
seen that.
Yes, you have? Oh boy, well good. And there was just a director they were talking to the other day, because it's been that many years since it came out, and saying, well, why did you do that? Why did you call it Love Actually? And he said, well, you know what? There's so many movies and films about what's wrong and terrorism and violence and criminality. I wanted a movie, and there's 9 different stories in that movie about what's much greater in the world, all kinds of experiences of love going on, that we're made for, but often don't get the attention. And I tell people, people will say, well, hey, was there? Yeah, it's everyday kind of love when we look around. Again, do we see the evil? Yeah. A final thing for me with that is, again, you mentioned before about Jesus' second coming, that it's always helped me because I was an idealist through the Vietnam War and civil rights and all that, still am. But I remember even with that, some of my friends became cynical and negative when it didn't all turn out right immediately. But I think that sense for me, and it's not meant to be a cop-out, but that our God too says there will be ultimate fulfillment. We may not, probably won't see the ultimate fulfillment in this life. We can still experience great joy, great love, great making a difference, but that the ultimate fulfillment of all creation, and even of what we're yearning for, that God gave us that yearning even in our own lives, and says there will be an ultimate fulfillment. And obviously in everybody's personal life, there'll be part of that ultimate journey to a love that is everlasting and ever present, and that's what we're headed toward and journeying on the way, yes. Learning how to love. Hey, thank you. Good to be together. Thank you for listening. And again, may you have a joyful Advent season, being able to say, "O come, Emmanuel." Emmanuel means God with us.